Welcome to the Movement Minutes with your host, Reid Nelles. Here, we pursue the human connection. We learn how to empower one another. We discuss clinical pearls. We discover our passions. We reflect on our capacity to achieve. We remain open to novel trends and concepts because regardless of our backgrounds or experiences, our successes or failures, we all speak the same language, human movement. On today's podcast, we've got Kyle Moore, the Associate Head Athletic Trainer for the Vegas Golden Knights NHL team. Super big, important position, but he didn't start there, okay? And today we talk about his steps that he took there following his passions to achieve this high-level position and what it takes in this position to communicate not only with the athletes, but the multidisciplinary providers that work within this organization and the team aspect of getting these athletes achieving their best possible. I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. It was a great conversation. I was very fortunate to sit down with Kyle, even though we were miles and miles and miles apart across time zones, which you'll hear more about in today's episode. But join me in welcoming Kyle Moore. All right, guys, today we've got Kyle Moore. He's the Associate Head Athletic Trainer with the Vegas Golden Knights. It's a NHL team. You might have heard of it. They're pretty darn good, and they keep beating the Wild, my team, all the time. But I'm excited to have him on the podcast today. I look forward to this conversation. As you guys just heard, the intro and all of Kyle's accolades. But Kyle, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Reid, for having me on this. It's been great getting to know you through some mutual clients and collaborating a little bit throughout the past couple of years. So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited for this. I'm an athletic trainer. I've been an athletic trainer ever since school. Found out it was my passion early in life when I got hurt a lot and spent a lot of time with athletic trainers when I was a young high school athlete. Yeah, tried to made a leap, move across the country for an opportunity for an NHL club, and couldn't be happier here in the role that I'm in.
So you just said throughout all your athletic endeavors getting injured, what sports did you play?
So in high school, I did soccer, basketball, and then track and field. I was always athletic all year round. I'd say mediocre at best at them. But ankle injuries were my thing. I always had chronic ankle issues, which has actually changed the way that I'm kind of active now. I've picked things that are less demand on my ankles. So spent a lot of time with my athletic trainer in high school. Still very close with her today. And it exposed me to what I wanted to do very early, which looking back on it now, I think was a big blessing to be able to have that knowledge right away.
Yeah, I think, human nature is getting passionate about the things that you question most, right? Like think back to any course you took in college or high school, the ones that you had the most questions in, like self-driving questions. Like, well, gosh, how does that work? That's what you get interested in. And I have a great relationship with my mentor that led me down the path I'm still in. So it's cool to see that you still have the same or similar relationship with who led you, your athletic trainer that led you down this path. So as you mentioned, jack of all trades, master of none. I'm guessing you went to a smaller high school. If you were able to play that many sports.
Yeah.
If you weren't elite, I mean.
Yeah, I'm from a very rural area. I graduated with a class of 160, I think it was, in my high school. It's called a small high school called Ole Valley High School. It's just outside of Reading, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So very small, very rural area, very tight knit area. I've always loved sports. Sports has always been my passion. Whether it was playing it or watching it or whatever involving sports. And that combined with thinking back on it now was probably my first exposure to like an anatomy physiology course at the high school level. And then that experience with athletics myself and seeing how athletic trainers work, I kind of fell into the profession because I knew I wanted to do something involving the human body, but I didn't want to be a doctor and go to school that long. And at that time that's kind of what my perspective was. And then once I learned what athletic training was, part of my favorite things about my job is that I get to have a front row seat to a professional game every every other day or every third day. So
Yeah,
I mean, I
except for
still
you're not looking for goals. You're looking for hell. Don't. Like you're the
no,
protective dad out there a little bit.
yeah. It was weird when I was in the bubble in Edmonton. Um, we were with some of our staff because they had it set up that when you weren't playing and if you had time, you could just go to like one of the suites and any team that was there inside the bubble could just go and watch the game. And I went to the first one. I'm like, I haven't sat and watched a live sport as a fan, and I could not tell you how long. Like I've been to
Yeah,
like the odd NFL game, like something like that, like in the off season with friends or something like that. But like just to sit and especially hockey, like to sit
right,
and watch a hockey game and not be working it was
right.
a super weird sensation.
That's super funny. That's super funny. So you mentioned you grew up in the East Coast. Now you live in Vegas. We previously were talking about the wind and all that fun stuff, but the heat and all that, like everybody knows. Do you get out and play a round of golf and sweat it out in the 120-degree heat at all, or no?
Yeah,
Or do
it's
you?
like yeah. Athletically, now golf is one of my passions. I've always played golf. It's been my dad taught me at a very young age. One of my big extracurriculars, if you will. But yeah, it's the biggest difference is the humidity. Um,
Yeah,
East Coast humidity. You play golf, you're sweating through three shirts. I
right,
mean, out here, I'll play in 105-degree heat and just make sure I got a bunch of water on me. I'm fine. Like I'm really not bad. Like it's hot, but
yeah.
it's tolerable. You're not sweating. You're not sweating the whole time through it.
So
So
would I be wrong in saying that you'd rather take the Vegas heat versus East Coast humidity?
now, yes, and
Yeah,
especially year one when we went to the final against Washington in June, and we got off the plane when we went there for our away games, and that wall of moisture just hits you.
right.
I didn't miss it at all.
That's
As soon
super
as
funny.
once I got exposed, I mean, I'm sure. I mean, my body's adapted, right? Like
Right.
it's gonna be a different level of a tolerance, but um, yeah, and like I'm a wuss now when it comes to cold. Like I used to be. I mean, Pennsylvania is not Minnesota, but I mean, it still gets cold and you still have a winter.
Right.
Now, like I'm like walk outside and it's like 60, and I'm like, where's my jacket?
Right. It's funny how
So yeah,
that changes so fast. Like you can go on a vacation for a week and a half or 2 weeks or whatever, and you come back to whether it's hot or cold that you come back to, and you just have an intolerance to that so fast.
oh yeah,
Um, I completely disagree with you. I lived in Colorado for a couple, like 3-4 years, and that dry heat just sucked me. I mean, it just dried you out from the inside out. And like you said, you have to have water on you. That dehydration factor was huge for me, and I'd much rather have the humid heat. Much
yeah.
rather. So
Yeah,
funny.
the interesting thing with the wind is though, like it completely changes, and we see this with our athletes all the time because it's a climate they've never been exposed to. So when they come in the training camp and when the winds kick up, I mean, Las Vegas is a big valley,
Hmm.
and when the winds kick up, it completely changes your allergy situation. Like my allergy season here is way different than it was East Coast.
Hmm.
So yeah, the dryness I mean, it's there 100%. And there's days in the summer where you walk outside and you feel like you just opened the oven. Like
Right.
there's days where I don't want to go outside. But for overall, if it's like that's what it gets up to like 150, 110, 115. Like
Right.
if it's 100 or even 105, if I'm outside in the shade, it's not bad. Like
Yeah.
I view it as tolerable, and I don't mind it at all.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to go full Midwesterner on this because Midwesterners are classically talking about the weather all the time. So, you had mentioned a couple times now that you travel with the team. Does that change your role as a athletic trainer and your I don't want to say your position and title or anything, but your jobs and your ability to work with the athletes when you're on the road?
Yeah, it changes it slightly. So from a therapy perspective, it doesn't change anything. We just travel with one less athletic trainer, and then the other athletic trainer is at home taking care of any of our long term injuries and long term rehabilitations. So I end up having a little bit more of a communication role with the higher ups of the organization and getting them the necessary updates that they need after a game, on a practice day, whatever the case may be. So I would say the part that changes the most for me would be my communication and who I'm communicating with. I would say.
That communication aspect, that working in a multidisciplinary high level system, really. Is that something that you were exposed to through your previous positions and through your uh, pre-career to where you got to now?
I think it's a very different, it's just a different level of communication. So, I mean, communication is always important. But when I was in the American Hockey League in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton in Pennsylvania, it was one athletic trainer, one strength conditioning coach, one head coach. I think we had two assistants at that time, but when we started out, we only had one. So one or two assistant coaches, and you all travel on the same bus. Like you're all always around each other, and it's the same core group communicating on a regular basis. It's a very easy level of communication, right? So that was one of the biggest exposures and biggest adaptations I had to make at the NHL level. Is there's more people, and when there's
Yeah,
more people around, if your communication level isn't high, things are going to fall through the cracks. And
right.
sometimes those things that fall through the cracks are important pieces of information. So it's so because now at our level we have three athletic trainers, massage therapists, two strength coaches, multitude of coaches, GMs travel. There's a hot the communication, it has a huge component to the success of especially our department. Like
Right.
if we're not saying a high level of communication, just for an example, our strength and conditioning coaches, and they're trying to do some sort of training stimulus that is negative to a current injury that's going on. I mean, that has big ramifications. I mean, that can certainly almost even affect the player status sometimes. So the communication is a very big jump from I would say the minor leagues to the major leagues, if you will.
Well, and that's something that you and I have experienced between our conversations is working with, like you said, clientele that are the same. Um, when we work with the same athlete, like you and I have had long threads of texts, calls, emails with something as simple as like, hey, what exactly should we be doing here? At what time? Should we wait a day? Should we wait 2 days? Should we wait 2 weeks with this individual? And it's that kind of communication that you said might be deleterious to their projection of outcome or potentially their status. So that communication aspect in all healthcare, not just professional athletes in the NHL specifically, is crucial. Um, with that, and this is something that I didn't plan on asking you, so feel free to touch on it as much as you want to or not. How do you view the secrecy of the NHL compared to other sports? Like you said, you are a avid sports fan. And when you watch the NFL, specifically this season, they'll say like this player out with COVID, out with a high ankle sprain, left side here, like they'll list everything. In the NHL,
Mhm.
it's upper body injury, lower body injury. Is that frustrating as a clinician and a fan, or one or the other? Or how does that feel for you?
If I'd separated out before the time that I worked in ice hockey, I would say it was frustrating just as a curious young wanting to be athletic trainer. It was always like, okay, but like now I'm at the point where if I'm watching another sport, say baseball or football, if I see the mechanism of injury, I got a pretty good idea. So
Right.
like no matter how much information they give or not, now that I have that knowledge, I can probably have a good idea of what's going on. But yeah, so I think it's just competitive advantage. You just don't want to give, especially if that player is still playing. If that player is still actively playing through an injury, I think it's any bit to get as a competitive advantage to just limit the chance of another team knowing something about your current squad.
That is the perfect answer that I was hoping you'd give, and I'm glad you said that because I agree. If you look at baseball or football, and not that there's, I mean, baseball, there's very little contact, right? But like football, let's take for example, if there's a contact injury, like you said, you can pretty much guess based off of the mechanism of injury what exactly happened to that individual. So, but in hockey, not to say that all these other sports players are or athletic endeavors are soft, but hockey's kind of got this tough guy mentality, so you'll see somebody get injured, break their jaw, lose some teeth, whatever it might be, fracture their orbital bone, and they'll still play the rest of the game. And so with this tough guy mentality, there is that competitive advantage to maintaining that secrecy. Because otherwise, you go out the next game, and if they're still in, you know that somebody else would be, unless they see stitches or something, the other teams, players are going to be targeting that specific joint, that specific area with every hit and contact that they make. So I like that. You started with Vegas in the year of their expansion, in the year of their genesis. I guess, what's it like to be a part of an expansion team, a brand new, fresh start, zero, pre-existing providers, zero pre-existing notions of how to manage a team. And of course, they bring in people with experience, right? But you guys are truly a brand new team, not only the players, but the staffing as well. Tell us a little bit more about how that came to be.
Yeah, it was actually one of the most attractive things that I wanted, that attracted me to the position. Um, it's rare. I don't know how many times you can see this happen. I didn't, I might never be able to be a part of this process again in my career. I'd probably say I probably won't, but it was special to be able to bring a group of people together that are all there. Our staff was just created with a high level emphasis on our ability to work together as a group. Like, we were recruited that way, and having that and being able to really establish culture. Like, the culture's thrown around a lot, but we really were able to establish what we wanted as a group, and our staff, on what are our priorities, what are our core values, what do we want this all to be. And it's all fresh. You don't have someone that's been there for 5 years under two different coaches from before. It was all brand new and fresh. I mean, all the way down to the point of literally moving the weights into the strength conditioning facility as a group. That's how bare bones it was at the start. And
team
new.
building 101, right?
Yeah, it was a special process. It was a special process to be a part of, and just see everything collectively grow.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, I think the biggest benefit of that is everybody has to check their ego at the door. It doesn't matter if you came from Scranton with the office in the background. I'm sure that's why you live in Scranton, right? That's an office reference.
The sign's there.
I know. Yeah, they weren't joking when they filmed that intro, right? No, it doesn't matter if you came from Scranton with this much experience and this, background working with the Penguins organization and all this, or if you'd been in the industry for 27 years and worked with 18 different NHL teams, or maybe you came from a different sport. Your entire staff had to check your ego at the door and work towards a common goal, which is team. I mean, that's kind of the definition of teamwork, right? That had to be really, really cool. So I'm glad you got to experience that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the chances are pretty slim for me ever to be a part of something like that again.
So you're not getting traded to Seattle then?
I mean, I've had people that are going to be a part of the Seattle team reach out, that are some of the hirings that they've made, and it's they want to see what's the most recent one, and I'm always happy to collaborate and happy to share what I can, because it's a special process, being able to be a part of something at that level.
Yeah, must be special being able to steal other teams' best players, right?
It worked out well first year.
I can't complain because the Wild were the expansion team too. So, but we actually had a team previously, so I don't know. So you work with the best of the best. Is there any difference from? I mean, you started as a graduate assistant working in collegiates. You'd worked with high school athletes in the past. You've worked with pretty much the whole gamut of what athletic training as a career can provide. What's the difference between everybody else versus working with the best of the best professional athletes? Or is there a difference?
I think the biggest difference is just the passion for their craft of being a professional in a sport, and then also their dedication to be as best as they can be at their sport. I mean, it's evident across any league that I've been in the ice hockey world, that it's a high level motivated athlete that is going to give you what the best they can, not only for their sport, but also if they're in a rehabilitative situation. And I think that's the biggest difference across the board, is just the dedication to them trying to better themselves on and off the ice.
Do you find that there's like an inherent trust built in then when, I mean, if Kyle says it, I've got to do it? Or is there, so AKA, is there less questioning when you give them a recommendation versus maybe other people or other individuals and athletes would? Or how does that go?
I think there's trust that needs to be built. Like that was to go back to our previous conversation and blend it, that was our primary goal of our first year was, I mean, we have a player from essentially every organization in the league with our team. They've all had numerous exposures to strength conditioning coaches, athletic trainers, therapists like yourselves, if they have a personal therapist, things like that, where they have a lot of opinions, and they've been exposed to a lot of things. So it's not just going to be day one, they show up and the trust is going to be there between our staff and them. So you got to establish that trust to be able to influence how their rehab's going, how their training going, be open to their exposures, which I think the reason I'm on this podcast is because of the relationship we built in a collaboration situation. So establishing those collaborations to build trust with the athlete is what's going to be able to have the best outcome for all parties, specifically the player.
That is phenomenal to hear because it doesn't change. I mean, they're human too, right? And they have their preconceived notions. And they have their, like you said, personal therapists and other experiences through their careers. And you're working with everybody from a rookie to a veteran who's been on potentially 6, 7, 8 different teams and bounced around the league, or received from a different league in 2017 or a different team in 2017. And it's really interesting and really relieving to hear that you still have to build that trust aspect. It isn't just inherently built in. They don't just say, oh, yep, showing up to work, got to do what they say. And that's the reality of therapy and working with athletes of any level is creating buy-in in the soft skills aspect of it and creating a relationship. Now, you don't have to be best friends, but creating a trustworthy relationship is crucial. So it's, again, relieving to hear that. You didn't always work with professional athletes. We heard in the intro kind of your background of how you got to where you currently are, but tell us a little bit more about your progression and your career and maybe the keystone steps that you took that led you to where you are today.
Yeah, I think when I first got exposed, even in the back when we were talking about the where I established athletic training, I still kind of had PT in my mind at that time too. I thought that was kind of maybe the route I wanted to go and work for. At the time, I was thinking more football. I was a bigger football fan, followed the sport a bit more, started learning more about the ins and outs of the sport, had exposures to the sport in my early college with my rotations at high school and college levels. What changed for me was on the PT side when I learned more about what all goes into being a physical therapist and what all goes into being an athletic trainer. Athletic training was just the right thing for me. I wanted to work with sport. I mean, there are obviously PTs that work with sport, but most of the time, I mean, at the professional level, you do have PTs that are there day in, day out, but most of the time you're more in an outpatient clinic. You might be working with athletes, but you're not there for the day-to-day operations. And I didn't have any interest at the time for learning about all the other aspects and domains that PT provides. I was more focused on the sport. So anyway, what changed for me was around sophomore year of undergrad, I would say. Yeah, I think it was sophomore year, which is right when you're getting into the professional phase of athletic training programs. So I reached out to our local ECHL ice hockey team called the Reading Royals. And I was home for Christmas break, and I was just trying to get as much exposures as I could, get as much connections as I could, just like any young professional. And all I did was email their head athletic trainer. His name's Brian Gogreski. And he was emailed right back, was happy to have me in just to observe over my Christmas breaks and whenever I was maybe home over a weekend or something like that for a game. And being exposed to the hockey world, the day in and day outs, it was just the culture of it was just amazing to see. The family like atmosphere, the respectfulness across all levels, no matter which player you are, no matter what role you're in. Um, yeah, I felt valued as a sophomore athletic training student, just there trying to learn something. And I was able to be a part of the group throughout my time in undergrad. And getting exposed to that at that time is what attracted me to ice hockey. Like, it was pretty much a shift. It was just like, all right, what ice hockey experience can I get?
Yeah.
Um, so my senior year at East Stroudsburg, our last internship, I shouldn't say our last internship, our last semester, you had the option of doing an additional internship, clinical rotation, I guess I should say, or you could take the time to study for our board certification exam. And I was purely on the aspect of, I want to get another experience. Like, why not? So the head athletic trainer for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins was an East Stroudsburg alum, and it was about 45 minutes away. So that ended up turning into a formal clinical rotation, which down the road turned into a graduate assistant position for the program, which it was kind of cool to be a part of the grassroots of that. But I was just looking for another experience. And again, same thing. Fell in love with the culture, the way the teams are run, just the tight knit community of it, and that's what brought me to hockey. I always had aspirations, I think, to get to the professional level, just because I've always viewed it as kind of the highest the tier of the sport, and be able to work with that high level athlete was always the passion. But that first exposure to ice hockey was what got me there.
Yeah, I think that what you said with the hockey culture and the idea of it being a family, like that can get a bad rep if you don't experience it for yourself. And like I've been guilty of this too, previously to working with so many hockey players and being part of this hockey culture. It really is one of the coolest. I don't want to say goony, like some of the people that you get to work with are fun individuals, and that can go across all different sports, but hockey players in specific are just really fun people to be around. And not knowing the inner workings of an organization as big as Vegas, but just the individuals that I get to work with, I completely agree with that. I do find it funny that you said previously you looked into PT school, but you didn't want to be a doctor. You said earlier that you didn't want to go to school for that long, but you went to undergrad and then you got your master's. And I mean, you spent some time in school, so you could have been a doctor. I mean, don't sell yourself short on the title alone, right?
No, I agree with that. I mean, I think, my wife's a physical therapist. I have nothing against the physical therapy field. I mean, she works in a inpatient hospital, and her goal is to get people to go home, just to activities of
right,
daily living, be able to
right.
function with activities of daily living. That's just not my passion.
No, and I completely agree with that.
She loves it, and
Yeah.
I'm happy she loves it. But it's just not where my passion was. And yeah, but then this is going to kind of going by the wayside now with where athletic training has gone with their education side. The role I had when I went to graduate school was I had a graduate assistantship. And with athletic training changing from an undergraduate degree to a master's level degree needed to sit for your boards, that position was so like, I had the option to do a one. It's funny. I guess I kind of contradict myself. I had the option to do a 1 year or a 2 year option in grad school, and I wanted the 2 year option because I got a chance to work with their club ice hockey team there and truly be a head athletic trainer right out the gates. Like, it was it wasn't like your division. It was a Division I school, but this was called the ACHA, was the league, and it was essentially it was a very good club. Like, there were players that would consider going to this league or Division III ice hockey. So it wasn't like just, hey, let's get together and play hockey. No, it was a very legit league, very competitive league, and I had the opportunity to be a head athletic trainer right out of school, which was daunting at the time. I had 3 undergraduate athletic training students working underneath me. I'm just certified. I'm the head athletic trainer for a club ice hockey team. I'm just trying to figure out myself, let alone trying to educate people.
Right.
But I grew so much from my first year there to my second year there. And I think athletic trainers it's going to be hard to get that experience moving forward with this shift. I mean, I agree with the shift to the masters. I think it's very good for the profession. Don't get me wrong, but that opportunity to be a graduate assistant is kind of gone, or at least go by the wayside, not as popular, where it was very valuable.
I guess to expand upon that, I guess through your experiences getting to where you are today, when you got that call in 2017 saying like, "Hey, your application looks beautiful. We want to get you to sit down, not just for an interview, but you've got the job," kind of thing, for Vegas, right? Did you feel that through the experience that you just mentioned, that imposter syndrome and that daunting feeling of, "Am I qualified? Am I actually worth this position?" Was that gone by the time Vegas came around, or did you still have a little bit of that?
No, I think it's only natural to have that a little bit with any new experience, right? Like I think every experience that I've had as I've moved from job to job, there's a level of, okay, what do I need to do at this? Am I ready for this? Is this something what like really get everything mentally around the idea, no, I'm ready for this. This is what I've worked towards. This is what I need to get to. But yeah, I think it's definitely there. Um, it was there were certain aspects of the position that were definitely a bigger jump than I would have expected going from the American Hockey League to the National Hockey League, and just had to adapt and overcome in the moment. But it was I mean it was a special time being able to get that call to be able to have the position out here, and it was exciting and nervousness at the same time, I would say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, nothing good comes from easy, right? I mean, that challenge and that inner workings of work ethic that you've built up to that point led you to even applying for that job and even having a consideration for it. So it's definitely well deserved, is what I'm getting at, right? With that building process, and this is a question that feel free to answer however you need to and want to. Has there been a instance where maybe not a failure, but a big learning moment in your career path and your trajectory that has been kind of a defining moment? Whether that's, like I said, either I don't want to say a failure, but um, something that you learned from that has guided you the rest of the way.
I think for me for that, I think the it goes back to a topic we talked about before, which was based around communication. I think very early in my career, um, I was dictating things rather than communicating things. Not, and I'm not by all saying that like it's my way or the highway, but I think as I've grown throughout my career, there's been instances where I need to value the audience that I'm talking to, and that communication changes with any audience that I'm speaking to, and you have to learn the situation, learn the person receiving the information. How do they need to receive it? How do you need to communicate it? And things like that. An example that I would go back to would be I had a player earlier in my career where he went out and we were traveling. We were in a town where he played college, and he went to a local therapist, someone kind of like yourself, to receive care and receive this. And that was at a point where I was very early in my career, and I wasn't exposed yet to the high level of collaboration that's needed for the best thing for that athlete. In this situation, I wrongfully at the time took it as, why'd you go and do that? Why did I not get informed about this? Like I was centering it around myself versus centering it around what was best for the athlete. Like you said before, athletes have relationships with other therapists. They have relationships with other people throughout their careers and throughout their athletic career. And looking back on that now, I think I've truly grown from that, in that it should have been more of a collaboration approach. It should have been more of what is best for the athlete in that moment. Whereas there is the other side of the coin where I need to know the status of the athlete, right? Like I still need to inform our coaching staff of who's available to play that night. So there is that other side of it. I just think I was way too far on that side where I didn't take into account what the player was looking for and what the player was trying to get.
Yeah, the personality behind the athlete is
Mm-hmm.
huge. I mean, it's not just this meat bag that a company or a team owns. There's a brain behind it, and they have their trusting relationships or we have to acknowledge and at least appreciate their preconceived notions and what they want in their career as well. So really, really cool to hear. So thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
I want to finish today's conversation with the 3 questions. I don't believe I gave you a heads up on these, so these might be a little surprise for you. But these are 3 questions that I'm going to be asking every guest on the podcast, and I think it's really cool to hear what you have to say, hear what all these people that I look up to and see as keystone figures in this healthcare industry and just the moving world, and being able to pick their brains on. Okay, so you ready for this?
Yeah.
This is not professionally related, I think, unless you want to answer it that way whatsoever. If you could be ranked top 10 in the world at something, what would it be and why?
My immediate thought goes towards golf because it's always been like my competitive hobby outside of sports kind of thing.
Golf is a sport.
Um, so I've just never played it as a sport.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I actually kind of like go back and think like, man, I wish I did high school golf instead of soccer. Like that would have been so much more fun. But I love soccer at the same time. That's why I never did it.
Right.
So yeah, I'm probably leaning towards golf on that one. On a kind of related option, I've really gotten into mountain biking lately. That's been kind of like my COVID safe activity, but still getting benefit out of it physically.
Yeah.
That's kind of been my go-to since this. So like really getting into that field and like just like slowly doing harder and harder trails. Like it's not a top 10, but like slowly like getting over spots and getting up spots that I've never gotten to before has been I'd say an accomplishment I've seen in that in itself. A true top 10 though. Golf is probably where my mind goes towards first on that.
I think those 2 answers are perfect. I mean, you can choose 2 answers. There's no right or wrong answer to this, right? I think it's funny that you say those 2 because golf is easily my answer. I mean, imagine being, heck, not even top 10 in the world, but like top 100 in the world. You show up for 4 days. Hopefully, if you make the cut, let's say you take 68th place or something like that. You're still coming home with hundreds of thousands of dollars to play a beautiful course and do something that you love.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to go home or wherever to the next tournament and just play again and again. And I mean, for me, I love golf, so I'm right there with you on that one. And
Yeah,
then
sorry to touch on
no,
the
no, no.
golf. Like it's always been like golf for me is like I don't have the time anymore to be as good as I could be at golf. I'm sure
Yeah.
you're probably in a similar boat. Like I grew up, my summer job growing up was golf course maintenance crew. I've worked on golf courses all throughout high school and even through my college years and summers. So I played a lot of golf.
Yeah.
And I got to be pretty decent at it. Like I got to be able to shoot in the 70s pretty consistently. And the frustrating part about it is now is that I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Like maybe you have flashes of it, but it's a sport that if you're not doing it and you're not playing at a consistent basis, it's not going to happen, and it's frustrating. I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can relate.
Oh, yeah.
Like you have your best rounds, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to be able to do this every week. Not a chance.
It's a drug, and that's what I was going to say. That's exactly what I was going to say about mountain biking. There's 2 things that you mentioned that you just can't perfect. You can't have a perfect route or trail on a mountain bike, and you can't have a perfect round. There's no such thing. You can't beat or win a golf game like against yourself, right? And because you can't shoot a 0, that's just physically impossible. And you can't shoot an 18, that's impossible too. So 2 things that you can blame the weather, you can blame the tread conditions, you can blame a lot of things, but at the end of the day, it's yourself. And those are the kind of sports that I think a lot of, not even sports, activities, if it's underwater basket weaving or scrapbooking or whatever you're interested in as a hobby, I think more people should find something that is unwinnable and challenging within themselves and their own willpower. It's a huge learning moment. So I like those.
I agree with that 100%. It's the challenge of it because, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I've had moments even where I've done the same trail over and over and over again. And the other day, I went over the handlebars at a spot where I've done millions of times,
Right.
and I'm like, all right. So it's a consistency and the consistent challenge that I think has driven me probably to those 2. Now that I think about it from that perspective.
Yeah, and then in that moment, of course, you're like, I have short-term disability insurance, don't I? Yeah, okay, good. I had the exact same thing happen to me when I was living in Colorado. I went over the handlebars and I didn't have disability insurance at that point. So I was starting to freak out, like, okay, I mean, knee-jerk reaction. I'm like, okay, something hurts. It doesn't feel broken, but if it is, and then you start getting that like anxiety set in.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I have disability insurance now. So that's the second time I've mentioned this on this podcast, by the way, which is kind of funny. So same story gets mentioned twice. Next question is, what's one thing you know that you can do better at and aspire to learn within the next year?
Good question.
Personally or professionally?
Personally, I would say my biggest thing that I want to get better at, and what is my focus, is how to be a parent. We're expecting our first child, and that part is something that is on my mind, and how can I be as best as I can be at this, but not overbearing at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is probably just a struggle of most parents. Other side that I probably is truly trying to be proactive at my job.
Yeah.
Like true, like it's something that is kind of in my foundation to, like, how can I truly move the needle and truly make a difference on preventing injury? So I've always had my mindset around what can I learn and what can I do to truly make a difference on that side of my job.
Yeah, I mean, and we see this. I love that you said that, because it's really easy, or it's not really easy. It's easier to be reactive in healthcare. I mean, most of our healthcare system is built off of reactivity, not proactivity, right? And I know through you've done quite a bit of research, or been a part of a research team into preventative measures for athletics. And so I know that's in your background of being more proactive against the risk of injury. And I think that's something that all of us healthcare providers either are already, it's a tongue twister, striving to do, or should at least look at ourselves in the mirror and try to do a little bit more of. So I like that you said that. On the parenting aspect of things, man, coming from somebody who has two under two, like, good luck. You don't. There's no teaching moment. You just learn as you go, which is one of the fun things about it. So So congratulations is what I meant to
Thank you.
say, and
Yep.
good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's the best job you'll ever have, man. It's the best job you'll ever have. You'll be great. You'll be great. Last question here is, what's one actionable step that you would advocate for listeners and viewers to take better care of their relationships, their health, their movement, and their lives? Like a daily tip trick, a weekly haiku, anything like that.
So I think there's an answer somewhere in where my idea is going, is that I've recently really brought into, like, where my readings have gone, and like my podcast listening towards stoicism, and like bettering yourself and bettering everyone else around you. So I've really gone down that path a lot, and I've really liked it. I've liked it for now moments in time where I need to be more aware of myself and how my actions are. It's really helped me navigate through some recent times, in professionally and personally. The other side that I've traditionally gone to with that question is, I've tried to involve myself in as much athletic training education as I have during my career. In having students, I do some guest lecturing at UNLV with their program here. And the biggest thing that I see is just as simple as, it goes back to the story where I first got exposed to hockey, is just reach out. Like there's people out there that want to help people. Like all you got to do is reach out and be willing to volunteer. I'm not saying like overload yourself, but they're, as simple as it is just reaching out and asking for help in certain aspects, whether professional or personal, that people are going to want to help you.
Yeah, and that's kind of the synopsis of both things you just said there. I mean, you're reaching out to research and books and stoicism, literature, or just inspirations to better yourself. You're volunteering yourself to better yourself, and then you're volunteering your time to help others. And I think that's one of the coolest things about every guest that I've had on here, and so many people across the world, regardless of their profession, is most people are inherently good and want to help. And your ability, I mean, I shot you a text and I was like, hey, Kyle, I'm starting this podcast. Would you want to be a guest? without a doubt, you're like, yep, love to. And send me the outline. I want to answer some questions. And you just jumped at the opportunity. So I greatly appreciate that. That's all I had for us. So I want to thank you so much, first and foremost, for joining me today. Sorry for the little time snafu. We got on a half hour early, everybody, because I don't know my time zones, apparently.
Math is hard. Math is hard.
I haven't traveled, so I generally travel across the United States, 2 or 3 times a month, teaching and all that. And I used to be pretty good at time zones and knowing exactly what time it was everywhere. It's been, I guess, since early March, since I've traveled, and I lost the ability apparently. So, but a little synopsis for us. Again, this is Kyle Moore, associate head athletic trainer with the Vegas Golden Knights. Works with some of the best, but at the end of the day, they're people too. And the communication that we use when talking to the individual that we're working with, whether they're an athlete or a run-of-the-mill recreational weekend warrior or just the 95-year-old osteoporotic patient in front of you, they're still people too. And the communication that we have with that individual, as well as the team that's working with them, is crucial. Follow your passions, and what leads you to asking more questions is how Kyle got to where he is today and getting interested in human anatomy and what the human movement body does for us. So again, Kyle, thank you. And look forward to hearing more of you and with you and working with you and the shared clientele in the future.
Thank you, Reid. Thank you for the opportunity.
Take care.